So I don't every year preach about love because, Saturday's Valentine's Day, but guys, pay attention. Valentine's Day, make sure you be thinking and you be thoughtful. Think of your wife or your girlfriend. It doesn't have to be expensive, but be thinking, be thoughtful. Wives, you too. Husbands need to be romantic. And make sure you guys each give each other something thoughtful. It doesn't have to be expensive. I love Valentine's Day. It's a good time to help improve your relationship with your spouse and a good time to develop a better relationship with family members or friends. All right. It's a good time to build relationships with many people, and I love Valentine's Day, but I'm not going to preach on it every year, but I like to preach on this topic every 5 years. On 5 different kinds of love. So the first kind is agape love, and it's important because this is my point of my sermon today. No, that's better. Okay. So the point again, I want you to memorize, this is agape love. And it means love for God. It means Christian love. Love through support. This is my favorite. This is my favorite right here. Selfless love. It means not thinking of yourself, not thinking I, not thinking how to take care of yourself. We know how to take care of ourselves. We buy ourselves clothes and food and house and all that stuff. We know how to do that, but this is how to give to others. And then godly love and harmony. So the Greek have 4 different. The next one is called eros love. And that's the kind of love between a husband and a wife, like a romantic love. The third is phileo. And it means brother and sister kind of love. Like a goodwill, being kind and supporting, encouraging each other. Like greeting with a kiss, that kind of love. We don't do that in America. We do hug. In deaf culture, we do hug. Hearing culture, they shake hands. Some hug. But there's a lot of people who, when they don't know somebody, they don't really hug. But in other countries, they greet with a kiss. They do a kiss on each cheek. So today's sermon is about agape love. Because it takes time for us to build that kind of love, but we should work really hard to build that kind of love. So the verse is in Acts chapter 9, 36 through 43. It's a story, and I'm sure you've heard this story before. Verse 36 says, in Joppa, there was a disciple. I love that. I love that the author Paul wrote there was a disciple with a woman's name. Yay! So in Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha, which means Dorcas. And that woman, she was always doing, hang on. Always doing good and helping the poor. In Hebrew, Tabitha means gazelle. In Greek, Dorcas means gazelle. It's a different name, but it's Hebrew and Greek. So some call her Tabitha, some call her Dorcas. So the town of Joppa, we're going to have a geography lesson here. So there's Joppa. So Joppa is 38 miles from Jerusalem. It's beautiful. So today, Joppa, they changed the name and now it's called Jaffa. Jaffa. Okay. And the capital city is Tel Aviv. So if you visit, you'd fly to that town, to Tel Aviv. And now it's called Jaffa. Thank you. I love maps, thank you. So Dorcas herself, her character, she was single. She didn't have a lot of money. We found all kinds of information about her, and she's an amazing woman. She was poor herself. She didn't have a lot of money. She liked to help people. Orphans, widows. She liked to help make clothes for them and to give them. And if they needed money, she would give them money. She helped anyone, and she loved everyone. She didn't shun people who weren't Christians, or she loved everyone. It didn't matter who they were. She would help and buy clothes, and she was kind and counsel, whatever. She was very helpful to people. And no one else was doing that kind of work. And she is a perfect example of agape love and what it looks like, because you have to be willing. Not many people are willing to do that, right? It's rare to find someone that their life is to help everyone in the world. Anyone, right? That's hard to find. It's hard to do that. Our schedule's too busy, or we have a family, or we have a job, or we have all these reasons why we can't. And it is hard to find time to show people, all people, agape love. Okay, let's read verse 37 through 39. So about that time, she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa. So when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, "Please come at once." Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. So this is cool because I want to tell you a story. In Jerusalem, they have no embalming. You know, whenever you die, they put the embalming fluid in and it takes the blood out. It's embalming fluid. And it kind of, they you know, before a funeral, they do that. Do you know what I'm talking about? In Israel, they don't have that. And it means that they must bury them the same day before the sun goes down. When they die, they have to quickly bury that person fast. So at that time, in the town of Jerusalem, they had to bury her the same day. They didn't have the embalming fluid. But if you live outside of Jerusalem, then you had 3 days. Because obviously it would smell. There's nothing to put in to prevent an odor. So they would wash them and put them in the upper room, upstairs room, so people could come and mourn. And the Jews, they did a good job with mourning. Today, Jews continue to do a wonderful job with mourning. I think I did a sermon one time. I think it's sad in America that we encourage people to be serious. You're supposed to cry before a funeral and after a funeral, but not in a funeral. You're supposed to do it private in your own home. And I think that's really sad because God designed people to mourn, to cry, to yell, whatever. And you need to do that. You need to go through it. You can't avoid it. You can't get past it. You can't go around it or under it. You have to go through it. And that's how we were designed. So they would be put in the upper room. You know, they had no embalming fluid. And I have an interesting story about embalming. It's not part of this. My friend, in 1957, a friend told me that told me a story, and some of you know this story. So on the radio, they announced that anyone in a town in the United States that the name of the town was Lebanon, that the mayor could go to Israel for free, could travel in Israel for free. It happened in Nebraska. There's a Lebanon, Nebraska. And the mayor of that town was old and he couldn't go. So he decided to give that to someone to travel. He gave it to a man who was studied. He's 27 years old, and he was a strong Christian, and he studied and he wanted to become a missionary in an agricultural country. He wanted to plant and work on their land. And that's what he dreamed of. He was really smart. So the mayor basically gifted him that. So this is my friend's cousin. So he was gifted that. So he went, and he went with the group on a tour, and he was learning and traveling. And there was one day in Old Jerusalem, there's a wall. There's a south gate called the Zion Gate. And they would, they could shop, they could buy things that they could remember Israel by. And they have land called No Man's Land. And it means you cannot go there. You're not allowed. You're forbidden to cross it. And if the Israelites went across it, the Palestinians, if you were Arab, you weren't allowed to go. If you were Jewish, you weren't allowed to go. So the Israel army and the Palestinian army would watch. You could not go into this land. So my friend's cousin, he was 27, he was going to become a missionary. He won a trip, yay, great. He's with this group, shopping, and he puts on this hat. Let me show it to you. It's called an Arab fez. So Arab used these, and he thought it was cool to put this on. And he was just curious, so he just started wandering around, and he went out into no man's land. And he was shot and killed. So no one can go in to grab the body, because if you go in to get the body, you will die also. Because the law of that land is no one can enter that part of it, that part of Israel. So they discussed what to do. They were trying to decide, it's possible he was still alive and they could take him to the hospital, but you can't go in to get him. So they don't know who shot him, but obviously you were guessing from this that the Israelis shot him. So they discussed it with the embassy, what to do, and they said, you must bury the body before sunset because there's no embalming fluid in the town of Jerusalem. It's the law that you must be buried the same day before sunset. That's the law. But who was going to go get him? Nobody could go get him. So they discussed what to do. It had been several days, and they left the body there. And then obviously they knew he had died for sure. So the United States Embassy, they basically came and they called a ceasefire, and the soldiers went in and got the body, and he was buried there. They couldn't bring him back to the United States because he had no embalming fluid. So they had to bury him there. But there's a good ending to that story. In 1963, 6 years later, the boy's father, so my friend, so they're brothers, my friend and her brothers. They decided to go to Israel to look at where he was buried. And they invited my friend to come. So the three of them went to Israel to see where he was buried, and they mourned and cried. And my friend met a Palestinian man there. And they talked about Jesus. And my friend said it was strange because his heart was open, his mind was open, and they were able to sit. They drank outside at a cafe, and they talked, and he ended up accepting Jesus. And so then that was where they set up the first Christian church in Israel. Isn't that cool? So every year they go to the church in the town of Ramallah. The deaf church. I wish it was the deaf church. There's a Christian church there in Israel because of that situation happening. Isn't that interesting? So when you tour, make sure you know where you're going. That's the point of that story. Anyway, it's interesting because, they didn't have embalming fluid. He couldn't go to the United States, and it's just an interesting story. So verse 40 through 43. Peter sent them all out of the room. Then he got down on his knees and prayed. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. Then he called for the believers, especially the widows, and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord. So all 3 times that someone was resurrected, Peter was there. So Peter would kneel to show that Peter did not have the power to heal people. Peter depended on God through him. And it's a cool part to take this part of the story, or this part of the scripture, and not think about what you can do for Jesus. Think about what can Jesus do through you. There's a lot of things that God can use us for. All of us can be used for if we allow him to work through us. So I have a story, and this is a true story, and I love this because it's about a boy who he lived in poverty, and his sister, she was going to have surgery. She couldn't walk, and I feel like this story is special to me because of Levi. He's had several surgeries and procedures to help him walk better. So I saw this story a long time ago, and I just fell in love with it. So this happened in a very poor place in town. There was a girl that needed surgery for her legs. And when the surgery was done, it would be successful, but the girl needed a blood transfusion. And this happened a long time ago. So now, they take blood and they send it to a lab, and then they save it, and then they can, do blood transfusions that way. But during that time, 2 people would lay beside each other, and they were hooked up one to the other, and the blood would go directly from one person to the other. So the brother was 14, and he's already involved in gangs. He was a rough boy, but he said, "I would be willing to give my sister blood." And at that time, they didn't have knowledge with, O positive, O negative, all that. And some people would give blood, and the person could die because they didn't know that they had to have the right blood type. So some people died, some survived, so it's kind of scary. But anyway, so that boy volunteered. He said, "I want to give my sister blood, and I want to help her." And so he laid beside her and allowed them to hook them up. And they were family members, so it was successful because they happened to have the same blood type. So anyway, he was giving blood, and he was being brave, and the doctor said he was being brave. And he asked the doctor, "So how long until I die?" And the doctor said, "No, you're going to be fine. You're just giving blood. Everything's going to be fine." But the point of that is that the boy thought, yes, I volunteered. He volunteered quickly. He was going to sacrifice himself to give blood to his sister so that she could live. He was 14, and to show that kind of love at 14 is amazing. And it's really rare, right? So that's called agape love. So it's interesting. So I want you to think about this. That boy's story is going to be passed down, or has been passed down for generations. Because, Dorcas, we still talk about that story, right? That was 2,000 years ago, but we still talk about that story, right? And that boy, his family, they're going to pass that story down. And that he gave blood, and he thought he was going to die and sacrifice himself for his sister. And that story will be passed down. But the point is this: how will people remember you? How are people going to remember you? When you're gone, how will people remember you? Will people remember that your name, they'll think, that person was always in trouble, that person gossiped, they were snob, they rejected people, they thought they were better than me, they complained all the time, they whined and cried, and they were criticized and judged people. Or are people going to say, they're going to hear that name and think, oh, I remember that person. They loved everybody. They treated everyone equal. They didn't judge. They were wonderful. They were helpful. I would ask for help, and they were eager to help. If anything I needed, they would say, sure, what time, where, what do you need me to do? They were always giving. So how are people going to remember you and me? How's that going to happen? Will people mourn for us? Will people say, finally? Will people remember you with agape love? Or will people remember you as selfish? My favorite word is selfless, meaning that you're willing to give and give and give. And I witnessed that yesterday with the furniture that was brought. Thank you. I hope you guys are okay. There was a family that donated furniture to the Nepali people. The Brodies donated. Linda picked them up this morning. So that's called agape love. Because we're all busy, right? It's hard to find time to say yes. And I have a poem. It's not always deaf-friendly. I read it, and I was trying to figure out what the English meant. I had no idea, but sometimes it's hard for deaf to understand poems. But this one's really good. It has a good point, and it made me think, and it made me want to change some things with people in my life. So, people come to a funeral and they tell stories. I don't want someone to come and tell negative stories about me. That's scary. I want everything to be positive. Not positive, but, I don't know. It makes me want to change some things in my life. So I'm going to read this poem to you. So this poem is about your and my dash. It's strange, right? Strange word. So I used my birthday. I should have used my birthday. Excuse me. So the person was born in 1959. And then there's a dash, and it says they died in 2059. So that person lived to be 100, so that's why I should have put my birthday. But maybe it's good luck that I didn't. I don't know. So the dash means what? What does the dash mean? So they were born and they died, but what does the dash mean? It's your entire life. It's all in between your birth and your death. So age 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 100, right? So what you do during all that time, right? So the poem is about your dash, meaning your life between birth and death. Okay, this is a good poem. The poem says, I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. So if we can just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel. And be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that with the special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Something to think about. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this amazing, beautiful day. Lord, I know that life can challenge us. We have struggles, and that's true. But Lord, I pray that through your Spirit, you will help us to work through people and to help people and to see all the beauty in every day and the beauty in other people and the diversity. It's beautiful. And everywhere, everything that you created, and yes, we may hear Satan tries to control the world, and that there's bad in the world, there's sinners, there's evil in the world. And it's scary. It's a dark place, and it's lonely. But help us to see the beauty in all that you created. Everything is still here. People, animals, trees, flowers, everything is so beautiful. And Lord, I pray that we see people also as equals. That we see people and children that you created, and that we learn how to say yes